Welcome to another informal discussion on building a more inclusive digital and analog world, where we'll learn about what's on the minds of experienced practitioners in the tech for social impact space. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking with Maria Axente. Maria is a globally recognized AI ethics expert who advises clients and partners across industry, academia, governments, and more on how to harness the power of AI in an ethical and responsible manner. She is also a passionate advocate for gender diversity, children and youth rights in the age of AI. So Maria, let's get started. What's one big thing on your mind right now that you think we need to be paying more attention to?
Hello, Josh, and thank you for having me. Probably one of the biggest things that is on my mind is how do we experiment with a technology that promises a lot but it's equally dangerous? And I'll explain in a second where I'm coming from. I was on a panel earlier about facial recognition, and that fancy glitzy technology that's being probably floated quite a lot in the US, but also in UK, and has the ability to identify a person based on a digital image, a picture that is taken by a camera in a public transport, and the social media, and compare it with a mugshot or with your profile picture from social media or your ID, and being able to identify it. And while I was observing or being part of this panel, one of the things that become quite clear is that there are two camps. One is the camp of against the facial recognition that advocate for a complete ban and of this technology because rightfully we don't understand it enough. But there's another camp of the so-called users, like police forces in different schools or different entities that found this technology to be useful, that will really want to test it, but in a way they are now overshadowed because the conversation is so much towards like, let's ban it, it's a bad technology, we should not use it, that it doesn't give room for a balanced approach. And I think one thing that I would like to see more is having this balanced approach. Like, we understand the risk associated with those novel technologies like facial recognition, like use of machine learning and deep learning and conversational agents in so many different contexts with the benefits, right? Because we know this technology has the potential to change individuals' life for the best and give, for example, access to education and knowledge to billions of children at the moment that they lack that opportunity, but with a good education system. But in the same time this technology is being highly politicized. So how can you find a balance? How can you understand what does it mean to find balance? Who needs to be at the table to discuss this? What are the different issues that need to be considered, and how do we proceed? Because in terms of technology, Silicon Valley has instilled in us this kind of behavior: move fast and break things. We can't afford this to do this anymore, because we have a technology that's profoundly disruptive and is profoundly intrusive, as we have seen. And we need to take time to pause, and we need to take time to assess the good and assess the bad, and then devise a path of action that's balanced, and accounts for everyone who's involved, and the big losers and the big winners. And that's not something that we have done in history. And it's a big challenge because on one hand, you have technology that operates globally. Take, for example, Alexa, right? So Alexa is not just a device that people see in their home. It's actually a platform that caters for data, or uses data from millions of users around the world. And this type of technology is supposed to be understanding values and sensitivities in very different contexts, while it's built by one provider, that's Amazon. Is a US-based company, while the product is being used all around the world. So how do you mitigate this tension in between something that's being built with the US, obviously following the practice and the norms that exist in US, with the technologies that's being used around the world in countries wouldn't we with this Americanize, if you want, or impose some sort of a new type of behavior using these technologies?
Mm. So what are you seeing? I mean, I spend a lot of my time thinking about some of these same issues as well. And one of the things where I really have a hard time figuring out what the sort of practical pathway forward is, and obviously a lot of this is, the development is mostly being done by private sector companies, a lot of them out of the US, but not exclusively. And where do you see, and their interests are different than the interests of society at large oftentimes, right? So without a heavy-handed sort of government regulatory approach, which still, I mean, you can't coordinate that at a global level. So there would still always be pockets that would allow for unethical development. And, you know, what are sort of the things that you're seeing in terms of ways to or convince or demonstrate to technology companies of the value of thinking about AI from the perspective of, you know, an ethical or responsible lens?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think that's what I was about 2 years ago. I was thinking, yes, it's going to be a huge challenge to internationally oversight development of AI, where and find a I would say a general standard. But I just because it felt it's difficult to do, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And as a
Right.
as a result of various conversations that happened internationally and regionally, a new structure was set up. It's a global partnership of AI that was powered by OECD and the countries behind OECD, with the
Mm,
view of understanding all the issues that should be considered when building AI to make it be responsible, ethical, and safe for everyone who's involved.
yeah.
And looking at who's involved, I think it's still the countries from the global north, and I think we still need to bring more diverse countries and developing countries and to have represent their view. But I think it's an excellent starting point,
Yeah.
and an activity aimed to, as I said, create at least a general standard. If one hand you look at the Human Rights Charter that uh, has in a way normalized and stressed the importance of each individual, no matter what they are in the world, and with their rights and responsibility. I think in a similar way we can do something that to mirror that human rights and stress out the big direction for developing this technology. Those then can be cascaded down a country level, and based on the specific context of each country, their governance regime being democracy, being an autocracy. In democracy, you have different shape of democracy. It could be a
Yeah.
presidential republic or a parliamentarian republic, and accordance with the regulatory regime, you can take those in, translate them in either in regulation when those issues are need regulation, right? But also translate them into standards, into certification, into best practices that will incentivize the good behavior. And the last layer, it will be at individual level, which is the developers of this technology, so individuals, companies, and corporations that develop, but society as well, to create a need for a responsible technology in general.
Mm,
That will be a norm. At the moment, the norm is just technology. So
yeah.
I think if we are creating this expectation from on society that all technology needs to account for the human rights and the human needs and be based and grounded in that, I think we will see that there will be quite a bit of pressure on technology companies to actually not just comply with regulation and adhere to standards and rules and best practices, but also respond to the challenges of their customers and clients that will require more transparency, more equity, more equality and fairness embedded not just in the technology products, in everything we do. I think we do live in a unique moment, especially if you look at what Greta Thunberg has managed to do and
Mm,
raise this phenomenal um, or create a phenomenal momentum amongst Gen Z and raise them and raise awareness about the issues that exist in the world, I think you can see that the next generation will be much more aware, self-aware of the societal issues, and they will not just put pressure on those companies, but they will be part of those companies and from inside apply pressure wherever this trend is not being followed. And ultimately, I would say, while this is a process that will take time because we're talking about building those structures for them to get off the ground and put together this body of knowledge and then cascade it down. I think what's much more will have an immediate impact is actually go to use case level and say, for example, if we look at facial recognition use in law enforcement or in a school security, or we're talking about the subject that kept the headlines over the summer in UK with an algorithm grading students in A-level exams. I think we could see very quickly that there are some applications that will require a certain type of approach. Therefore, we would need to have some sort of a tiering, like a risk and impact tiering. And some will be much lighter and they will not require that much oversight and thinking. So I think going case by case will allow us to have a little bit of a progress and experiment. Because as I said at the beginning, being on the panel about facial recognition, I think that the discourse around facial recognition is a little bit towards the negative side. I think we should be much more balanced, and we should allow ourselves to experiment in a controlled way, because otherwise, how else would we understand both the benefits and danger of the technology, of this novel technology we have around us?
Yeah. So that makes, some of what you said makes me think of, as you were talking about the pressures of within, and as more Gen Z who are more self-aware coming into companies, and hopefully, I think particularly in democratic or more open societies, hopefully we'll see a lot more of that pressure of really pushing on technology companies and from consumers too, to sort of force a little bit more of that lens. One of the things that also concerns me, and I'd love your thoughts on this. I'm sorry I don't mean to have this all be negatives, but I appreciate, any perspective you have, is as we see, a lot of democracies under strain or attack globally in current years. And we're also seeing a lot of investment by autocratic regimes, such as China, for example, into things like, social scoring and other control mechanisms that are using AI, using facial recognition. I wonder if we get to a point, if we experience a point where China or whoever, doesn't have to be China, starts to export those technologies to other countries, and it becomes a way to enable autocratic or aspiring autocratic regimes to really, take a stronger handle or more control over those countries and citizens within, and really control what people view, what they have access to, who is deemed to be proper citizen and acting improperly. Do you have has your work touched on that at all? Do you have any thoughts on how we can also try to mitigate some of that risk of it being exploited as a tool of autocracy?
Oh, wow, this is a deep and big question, I have to say. So,
and we only have a few minutes left, so you
okay.
gotta...
So I'll try to be brief, but I think one of the key ideas to keep in mind around AI that was on one hand heavily mystified and then heavily politicized. I think about a year ago, you could see in the last 18 months or so, you could see various states drafting their national strategies. Some of them, I'm not giving names, starting saying or making claims that whomever going to be first on the AI race will rule the world, which kind of put a lot of pressure and actually created a little bit of a false image about what AI is. Indeed, it has a potential to do this, but let's do not forget that humans still create this technology, and humans still have a lot of control. And by saying that, it's the technology fault that we're being used, or the technology fault that someone will rule the world, or is because of technology. I think we don't understand things as they are. And the second one is, how do we mitigate this? Is something I keep on saying over and over again, through education, right? So I think at the moment we lack a good understanding, a digital understanding in general. How many people understand what the internet is and how it works, or data is, or technology in general? And on top of that, which is, I think, much easier to understand, you have a technology that's rocket science. We call AI artificial intelligence. It sounds terrifying, it sounds intimidating. And when you start looking into, under the hood, it's even worse, right? Because it's not just about the models, which is pure maths, and how many of us are actually good in maths and continue to study maths. It's a handful of people around the world who have the brain and the expertise and experience to crunch or use maths to crunch big problems. Is the full architecture. And one of the books I really love is the Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Is Shoshana Zuboff. She talks about, in many with a lot of details about the story of Google and the business model. But one of the things she said, and it drew attention to me, is that there is some sort of a data priesthood, which is a select group of people that at the moment is the higher ranks of Google, potentially, that understand how it works, how Google works, what they have created. And with that in mind, it's very easy to mystify something that you don't understand. So I think we need to, in order to address, dangerous and toxic and weaponized technology that could come from autocratic regimes, but let's face it, could actually come from democratic regimes via different core companies, right? That hide under the in obscurity. It's by having citizens, active technology citizens, that will understand and being able to play their role in pushing back against this technology. And I was saying in my panel earlier about the UK case where the Southwest Police has decided to use automated facial recognition in some events, trying to identify petty criminal. And one of a civil liberty campaigner has pushed against that. At first, he lost the appeal, but quite recently, about 3 weeks ago, that decision was overturned, quoting the fact that the police has actually breached the European Convention for Human Rights, the Article 8, that promotes privacy in family and in a private life. And I think with that was such an important win, not just for the application or not of this particular technology in a particular use cases, but sending a signal that if you're an informed citizen, you can't challenge the deployment and use of this technology. And with that, you raise awareness in society. And with that, more people will understand that there's a lot at stake and we need to come together. And I think the only way to fight against the dark side of AI is actually by creating a rebel alliance, I keep on saying, and having more people join the force and being interested and active parts. And you mean, how do you become an active part? Well, there are so many different ways, but the first and the most important is seek to understand and educate yourself about technology in general. How does it work? How does it impact your life? And being able to ask a lot of questions. So a lot of the unethical examples, unethical technology examples that we have had have come because some people have challenged the system and they had not settled for what was given to them. And that was, it is a mammoth a task ahead. But at least by shedding light and having knowledge what's going on, you can change it. And I would worry less about China, right? I think they are in a different position right now with everything that happens in the world. And also, they are quite interested in exporting their technology. And guess what? They will always hit the wall of democracy and building consensus, which it's going to be a bit of a a killer joy for them. So I worry less about China at the moment. I worry more about this sort of technology being developed in democracies without oversight and transparency,
Yeah.
and hurting people, and them not being able to respond, their rights not being able to be protected by the governments they're supposed to represent them.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, this you preempted normally was my last question, so thank you. You saved me from that. Which normally I ask, what can you give one or two suggestions of actions that people can take today? I think you've already given a lot of, because I loved your idea of we need a rebel alliance. I mean, the reality is for any for sci-fi or Star Wars fans out there, right, you never know with each episode where the risk is going to come from. There's always a surprise, right? So the importance is that where people are educating themselves,
Yes.
they're aware of these things, that they're putting pressure on both companies and governments, and really we're sort of forcing both at a local level, at a consumer, commercial level, at a national and international level, trying to force and promote these positive or responsible approaches to AI. I mean, that's sort of my takeaway from what a lot of what you were saying was.
Yes, I agree. So that would be the first thing, is a journey to self-education and acquiring the right level of understanding what's going on. But the second one, being able to be brave and experiment, right?
Yeah.
I've seen the power of the creative power of Gen Z and other groups were given access to this technology and what they were able to create. So I think it's not just about being aware and being able to play a role in challenging how this technology is being developed, being a part of developing this technology. It's also very important. And going back to the Gen Z and the fact that we are almost giving them a dying planet, and the world of jobs is, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the world of jobs. It's not because of technology, it's about a tiny thing called a virus. But I think I would encourage everyone to have bravery and have a Coursera course on machine learning and start experimenting with it, because I think, yes, I did say that the data science is a rocket science, but this is a highest level. And while you standardize the problem solving, that could be easily learn how to operate with different packages and the open source technology that exists, and start experimenting. And we don't have time to give you the countless examples I've seen this technology being used by families, by teams, by women in foster parts of the world, and being able to come with something very creative and very that changed lives. So it's not just about focusing on the big tech companies that seems to have the expertise and the resources, is being able to tap on the free resources that exist and create technology where the need exists. And it shouldn't be done only by the big and the greats of the company. Should be done by everyone, because there's a lot of open source resources out there, but that's for a different conversation. But I encourage everyone to go and experiment and be brave. Actually, it's not that difficult.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Maria. I mean, I could keep talking with you for hours about this. And if I had a producer here in my non-studio, they would be yelling at me and flashing, waving their hand, saying, "You're over time. You got to cut." But this has been fantastic. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. If you do have any resources, be happy to put those in the description for people, so people can look there in case we have any resources where people can go to learn more. Maria, I want to thank you again for sharing all this with us today. And of course, to anyone who's watching, we'd encourage you, share any thoughts you have, reactions, questions in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to receive future updates. So Maria, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
My Josh.